Let's say you want to play a light prank on your friends Rose, Gilbert and Blue, so you throw them in a blender and blend them up. And you pour it out. It's white? How's it white? It's because we played a light prank on them. Literally. Let me explain. You probably know that mixing certain colors result in various different colors. Like red and blue makes purple, while red and yellow makes orange, and so on. These are called primary and secondary colors, where you mix the primary ones to obtain the secondary ones. But doing this with dyes versus doing this with light is completely different. These are called additive and subtractive mixing, but there's much more to it than that. And that's why I'm dying to talk about it. But first, this is your eye. Probably. And these are your color receptors. Green light makes this one happy and red light makes this one happy. But yellow light makes both of them happy, which your brain believes is yellow. And this brings us nicely to mixing light, or additive mixing. You may have seen this video by Vsauce, which is neat and true. It's not yellow. It's just a pixel on your screen that can show red, green and blue. The computer lights up the red and green parts of the pixel, which to your eye does the same thing as yellow light. And this kind of mixing is called additive because you start with a base color, take the next color and add it. I've mentioned yellow light, which you actually get when you add green and red light together. Which is why a lot of older computers use this color scheme. You can get all 8 of them by simply turning the primary colors on and off. This is more clear when looking at RGB values, as you are quite literally adding the colors. But another reason this is called additive is because you're basically adding the color to darkness. Which also means that the more light you add, the brighter it becomes. That's why even pure bright red on a computer screen would have a little bit of the other colors as well. And the same goes for dark red, for which you need less light. This is a good time to mention that brown is actually just dark orange, so quite literally less orange equals brown. At least your brain. What makes pixels work though is that they're really small, so your eye basically thinks that different colors are coming from the same spot. Okay, but what about dyes, paint? You may have noticed that our primary colors for light is red, green and blue, while for paint it's red, yellow and blue, right? Wrong, actually. Well, kinda. The primary colors in paint are cyan, magenta and yellow, again. Okay, technically the whole primary colors thing is a fake societal concept made to limit our power, but in this case, it's actually kinda useful. Otherwise, creating printers would be a lot more annoying. Now that we're talking about printers, when I mentioned cyan, magenta and yellow, you probably thought of these printer cartridges. And if you haven't thought of them, then well, that's okay too, I guess. So how do they mix? Let's play a painful prank this time, on our friends Cyclops, Maggie and Yellow. It's what? No, it's black this time. And the reason is, this was a painful prank. Again, literally. Paint or physical colors in general do what's called subtractive mixing. The reason is, this time around, it's not sending light directly to your eyes. Instead, the colorful substance receives light and sends some of it back. Easiest example would be white light, or sunlight, which has to be polychromatic by the way, which means that it has all these pretty colors that make all of your receptors happy. So for example, red paint takes this white light, absorbs all the colors besides red and sends it back. And that's what is called subtractive mixing. You take the initial light color and subtract. I've mentioned how in additive mixing you start with darkness and add the colors, but here you do the opposite where you start with light and remove the colors. But this is why printers use cyan, magenta and yellow. With red paint you lose all the colors besides red, but with cyan for example, which to our eyes means blue, green and everything in between, red is the only color that you lose. This means that these colors give you much more control over the result. And unlike light, in this case more color means darker because adding more color means you take away more and more light. The opposite is, of course, no color equals white. With paint though, that's probably just a blank paper. Oh, and something really cool that printers do is use this fourth color called key, which is just black. This confused me at first, but it's quite brilliant. Basically with these colors, if you want to print black or make something dark, you need to use all 3 because together they subtract all the colors. But instead of adding a bit of all 3 colors just to make something darker, you add a bit of the single black color. I finally understood this after watching this video by Gneiss name, which I probably mispronounced, but the graph that's shown here makes it quite obvious. So for example, if you wanted to print this blue color, here's the ink that you would need. You see the part where it needs all 3 colors? Well, whenever you need to use 1 unit of each color, you can just print 1 unit of black instead. And if you're wondering why printers use cyan, magenta and yellow while painters use red, blue and yellow as their primary colors, well, me too. I couldn't find a definitive answer to this, so if you do know, let me know. From what I understand though, it has to do with simplicity, tradition and maybe even flexibility, because painters use more than just the primary colors. But hey, that's just a theory. A color theory, and if you found that interesting, you should also check out my last video where I talk about how black and white images work. Also, did you count how many times I said subtractive? 5 times. But do you know what else starts with sub and ends with 5? Well, if you subscribe, I'll give you a high 5. That's the joke.